Welcome back to the Excellent Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Chad Biagini, and joined today with my colleague and co-host, Mark Maylaban. Today, we're diving into the world of sports management, athlete representation, and what it takes to be one of the world's most successful sports agents. We are joined by Jeff Schwartz, founder and president of Excel Sports Management. Jeff is widely recognized as one of the most influential agents in the game. He began his career in tennis before transitioning and becoming an NBA agent, and today he leads one of the largest and most successful sports agencies on the planet. Today's conversation is a masterclass in vision, strategy, and relentless execution. In the episode, Jeff shares how he transitioned from managing individual athletes to scaling a multi-sport global agency and the mindset shifts required to lead a growing business in a highly competitive environment. He shares key lessons he learned from working with athletes like Jason Kidd, Paul Pierce, and Derek Jeter. If you're looking for insights on leadership, entrepreneurship, and building long-term relationships in the competitive world of sports, you do not want to miss this conversation. Let's jump right in. Hi, I'm Chad Biagini, host of the Excellent Leadership Podcast. I'm joined with my colleague and co-host Mark Maylaban and Jeff Schwartz, founder and president of Excel Sports Management. Jeff, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk to you guys.
For a long time, U.S. sports emphasized don't have your child specialized, make them a multi-sport athlete. If you look across the best soccer players in the world, most of them grew up in countries where there was only one sport.
Yeah, by the way,
sport athletes.
It's something that absolutely has changed, even in the U.S. If you're a young golfer, you're a young tennis player, I think maybe a little bit in team sports, you can do a few things right now. You can play a couple different team sports because there's a little bit of that athleticism that you are gaining from playing another sport, different muscles in your body, different things you're doing. The problem with individual sports is there's so much time and energy that goes into that sport to perfect your backhand, perfect your forehand, perfect your 6-iron from 160 yards out, that there is not time to do those other sports. And I feel bad actually for one of my daughters, that because she's a really good athlete and I know she'd enjoy playing volleyball or basketball. I know she would, but there's just no time to do it where it's an organized league. You just can't do both things. So
yeah, and I think some of the U.S. sports allow the multi-sport athlete because baseball, there's only so many hours you have to practice that single position, and you can get your fitness from football, and even football.
Yes.
Is more athleticism than individual skill in my argument, where tennis, golf, soccer, there's a lot of individual technical skill.
It's that technical skill that you have to hit thousands of balls for thousands of hours to get there if you're going to be at that level. I had coffee with with Jeter a few months ago because he lives around here and we'll get together once in a while. I've known Derek since he was in the minors. So I've known Derek his whole life, like his whole career. And we were talking about this. And he said, when I played in high school, he said, I didn't travel until I got to the there was no travel teams. There was no nothing. I mean, he just played at his high school level and some other stuff, but it wasn't this specialized thing that you see now.
That wasn't that long ago. 20 years. Well,
more than
30
that.
years. Yeah.
You're talking, he's been out, he played 20, he's been out 5, 25. He was 18. You're talking 30, 35 years ago.
Yeah.
So
I was talking to a friend of mine just last night over dinner, and he shared that he's encouraged his son's dream of being a pro athlete. And his argument for it, he goes, I realize there's a high likelihood he doesn't make it. But why is it that if someone says, my child loves playing piano, we travel around piano, parents don't go, the likelihood of your child becoming a pro piano player is really small. He said, or similarly, someone says, I want to go be an astronaut. We don't go, you're not going to make it, sweetheart. Right. But athlete, there's almost this feeling to say,
no,
it's unlikely.
You said the second part of the conversation. It's great that he encouraged them, but he also knows the second part.
He knows the second part.
There are so many unrealistic families out there. And I see it a lot in the tennis world. Really, tennis parents are a whole thing.
It's the American Idol effect.
Yes.
It's like we all see how your child did on that audition. Did you not see how your child did?
Oh my God. There's no, real awareness. And I get it. Love your child, want it really badly, but you have to be realistic about it.
How does one develop self-awareness?
Self-awareness is one of my key things I think about for at any level, whether it's sports, whether it's business, whether it's anything. People that are short-sighted on self-awareness or don't have it can never fully hit their ultimate goal of where they could really be, like achieve what they really want to achieve. Because if you don't have it, it's something that you will not get unless people really tell you. Like, you have to have a hard conversation with people sometimes about self-awareness. If you don't have self-awareness, because those are your blind spots. And if your blind spots are really big because you don't have self-awareness, the world looks at you in a very different way than you look at yourself. I'm not really sure the answer of how you get it other than some hard conversations with people that are going to be honest with you.
As a leader, is it more important to develop and build your blind spots, or to focus on continuing to develop and build your strength and just hire people for your blind spots?
You don't know your blind spots, though. That's the problem. Like, you don't always know your blind spots. So I think it's important to get people that don't always agree with you. Yes, you need symbiotic alignment in your company at a certain level to continue to grow. But I think it's so important to have people that are going to have a different opinion than you, or offer a different way to think about something. Or if it's an area where you don't know enough about, or it's an area that's a developing area, make sure you bring someone in that area, because it's very easy to think about. I know how I grew up in the business. And one of the big things for me was, as the company changed from being really small to a little bigger, and as it continued to grow to 100 people, 200 people, 300 people, you can't run it the same way. You can't think about things the same way. You can't expect everybody there to know you, to know me, and think, oh, Jeff's got our best interest, don't worry about it. And that whole idea of whether it's making sure that there are not big blind spots and how you're communicating, that really changes, I think, as a company gets to a certain size. And so I've evolved on how I've thought about it. But one of the things that probably in the last 5 or 6 years that I've thought a lot about are blind spots, and making sure that we have people that are coming in with different opinions, so we can make sure those blind spots don't become troublesome.
The skill set of running a book of business and the skill set of running a business are very different skill sets. What advice do you wish you had as you went through that journey? Because you've built an incredible business, but at some point you were focused on a book of business.
Being an agent doesn't always mean you're going to be a good business leader, right? Being an agent and worrying about specific clients and keeping people happy and going out to get the next client, it can take you so far into the weeds that you're not thinking bigger picture stuff. And one of the things that I've always thought about is, what does it mean? Even when we were really small, what does it mean to build a business? Like, what does that mean? And whether it's, I have a few people in my life that were important to me when I was younger that I would always bounce stuff off of. I clerked for a judge when I got out of law school, and he was very close to me, like a second father. And I used to always talk to him about, how should I be thinking about, I hadn't had any career at that time. I was just out of law school. I clerked for him. I hadn't started in the sports world yet. I hadn't even met an athlete at that time. But I would think about, I knew I had this idea that I wanted to work in sports. And I had this idea that I thought I could make a difference, get on the agent side and make a difference in an athlete's life. But I used to talk to him about, how should I be thinking about that as it pertains to the big picture? And he would just say to me, don't think too narrowly. No matter what you're doing, whatever that is in your life that you're doing, make sure you're looking around the corner and thinking about. So that's always been in the back of my mind. I think that when I started Excel, my hope was to build something which would allow me to continue to be an agent, because I really enjoy working with athletes, but also to use the part of my brain and my skill set that I thought I had to think about growing a business that could be a multi-tiered business in the sports world. And as I've told you before, I started in the tennis world, which is completely different than basketball. I mean, it couldn't be any different. You're
started as a player too, right?
I thought I was. I thought I was a player.
Depends on how you define player.
Yes,
right?
I quickly realized I better go to law school. I wasn't good enough, but I played. I left school after my sophomore year to try what's called the satellite tour, and then quickly came back with my tail between my legs and said, I need to go to law school. But the tennis world, there's no teammates, right? It's an individual. There's no team contract. There's only what the player makes, just like golf, on the tennis courts or the course for a golfer, and the marketing dollars. And the better you are as a player, the more marketing. So one of the great things that tennis gave me was I learned very early on how to market players, because I was representing players from all over the world. I had a player, Marcelo Rios, who was #1 in the world in 1998 from Santiago, Chile. I spent a lot of time in South America with him. I represented Martina Hingis, who's from Switzerland. And so understanding how to market a European, a Swiss-German person. And then in the U.S., Pete Sampras, and worked many years with Pete Sampras. But that global perspective gave me, because I was all over the world, really on how to understand people from different parts of the world and how you have to approach things differently. Sometimes as Americans, we think it's just our way and that's the way, but you really learn very quickly there's a lot of ways to do something. But that marketing piece was so useful for me when I went from tennis into the basketball world, because that's how I differentiated myself with starting Excel. Because when I first started, I said, okay, I'm going to represent basketball players. All the basketball agents would torch me. They're like, he's a tennis agent. He doesn't know anything about basketball. Don't sign with him. But I used what I did know was, okay, maybe I'm coming from the tennis world, but I understand how to market you, player, way better than any of these team sport agents do. And so I was really lucky. My initial start in sports, my first 3 clients I signed in basketball, and I'm saying there was luck involved in this, were Jason Kidd, Lamar Odom, and Paul Pierce. And I signed all 3 of them in the same year.
Which one was first?
Lamar. Lamar was my very first guy.
Do you remember the pitch?
Yeah, can you walk us in that pitch?
I remember Lamar coming to my little office and looking on the wall, and he said, Pete Sampras? I said, yeah. You represent Pete Sampras? I said, mm-hmm. All he wanted to do was talk about tennis. And we didn't really even get into anything. We talked about tennis. He left. He left my office. I'm like, okay, I may never hear from him again. And then a couple weeks later, he called me and said, okay, I want to hire you.
Really?
Yeah, it was like that. Jason was more of a formal. He really wanted someone that understood the marketing world. He was already all NBA and all-star, but he didn't really have much marketing, many endorsements. And so I met with him. We had a great meeting, and I remember he had a few people there. They asked me a lot of questions. But the one thing I really knew was the marketing world. You can ask me anything on that. And so he ended up signing, and then maybe 4 months later, the same thing with Paul Pierce. And little did I know that 2 out of 3 of them would be Hall of Famers.
Right.
So I'm like, oh, this basketball thing's easy.
Unbelievable.
So that was
your first 3 NBA clients ever.
Yes.
Were those your first clients that you single-handedly won too, like Sampras and Martina?
Well, those were from, I was at IMG with those. I mean. Yeah. So that was my start in basketball. That was in 99, but it still took me some years. I couldn't get rookies because I would go into the draft and the other agents would say, he's a tennis guy. He can't help you through the draft. He doesn't know teams. And so it took some time to really develop there, but eventually I got that. And then we, all firing all cylinders after that.
How does that work when you were jumping into the NBA world so now you've landed Lamar and Jason, then you've got to go find marketing dollars for them. So you're working both sides of the coin because you didn't have a huge agency behind you at the time, right?
No, I had 3 people. Yeah.
3 people.
Yeah, it was 4 of us.
So Do you remember the first major marketing contract you did for either of those guys, and just how that came to fruition? Are you cold calling CMOs of Fortune 100 companies?
Yeah, we absolutely calling people and now, okay. I remember I did work with very high level tennis players on the marketing side, so I had relationships from that. So I knew sort of how to make a plan of what we wanted to do with them. But it was the first time that I really started understanding how the NBA works and the NBA's marketing arm works and how the union works, and how team sponsors because in tennis, you didn't have any team sponsors. You didn't have an arena so I used that also. And they were also really good players. So that helped too. All three of them were fantastic players. But I remember Jason Kidd was traded from Phoenix to the Nets in maybe 2000 or 2001, and the Nets were horrible. And I was like, okay, well, actually, this is kind of a funny story. I was in town for the NBA draft, and I don't even remember why I was necessarily in town for the draft. I might not even had a player in the draft, but I was in town for the draft. And I had flown in from Wimbledon to go to the draft because I was still in the tennis world. And I was leaving the next day to go back to Wimbledon. I was going by a journalist, and I think his name was David Aldridge, who said it to me at the time. And he said, as I'm literally walking by him, he said, Jason Kidd's about to be traded. And I was like, panic hit me because I didn't know anything at this point. I mean, I'd been in basketball for maybe a year and a half. I don't know. And so I called up the GM of Phoenix. I still remember what he said to this day. I can't confirm or deny it. And I hung up the phone. I said, yeah, he's being traded. I mean, if you're telling me something, I didn't have a strong relationship with him, so he gave me that line. And so the next day I flew back to Wimbledon. I wake up and Jason Kidd's traded to the Nets, which was a really helpless feeling at that point because I just didn't have the relationships then. Anyway, he goes to the Nets, who are horrible, and he turns them around instantly. They got to the finals his first year and the finals his second year. And he's in New York, sort of. The Knicks weren't so good at that point, so the Nets became everybody paying attention to the Nets. So from a marketing standpoint, there was so much to do with him. And national brands were coming in, and I just remember Gatorade and American Express, and so there was a lot to do with him.
Different from Pete and the tennis players is like, to your point of similar to golf, they have their winnings on the court, but they don't have major contracts with the team or franchise. So how did you learn the business of negotiating the team contracts or the NBA contracts?
I think that was more being a lawyer and spending time both clerking for a judge and then working for a law firm. So I went to a law firm before I got into sports, and I was doing what's called business litigation. And I think I just had an idea from that. I probably asked a lot of questions. I think I really irritated a few general managers in the beginning because I was so picky. I remember one GM, Jerry Krause, who was a great GM for the Chicago Bulls when they won all their championships. I wouldn't agree on a contract for Tyson Chandler, who's been a longtime client of ours. And I signed him when he was 18 years old, right out of high school, when you could come out of high school. And we're negotiating his Bulls rookie contract. And I wouldn't agree on this one clause. And Jerry Krause, I remember him saying this to me. The way I'm giving it to you, Jeff, was good enough for Michael Jordan. So it should be good enough for Tyson. And I said, no, I'm not agreeing with you. I said, I don't care. And so I think I was really hyper detailed over the top in the beginning, learning a lot of this stuff.
Who was your first draft client? Do you remember?
Tyson might have been one of the first.
That was the era of a lot of players, not a lot, but several players are coming directly out of high school.
So in Tyson's draft, he went number 2. The guy went number 1, Kwame Brown, high school. Tyson, 2, high school. Eddie Curry, 3, high school. He might have gone 4, maybe he went 4. And then Sagana Diop, 6, high school. So 4 out of the top 6 guys were all from high school.
Really?
And as I always say, if you look at everyone's careers, Tyson's the only one who really had a real, serious, long, successful career. Sagana Diop played for a bit. Kwame for a bit, Eddie for a bit, but nobody had, Tyson played, I think, 19 years in the NBA.
And when those first 3 clients you signed in the NBA, you just mentioned, did you have your own? Where were those? Were you still at IMG, or you'd gone out?
No, I had left. I had left IMG.
So fill us in the gaps. You left IMG. Then how does Excel actually form?
Okay, so I had a pit stop in between. So I went to a company called AMG. Now I should have known changing one vowel was not enough. That was a mistake right there. Artist Management Group, started by Michael Ovitz, and they wanted to get into sports. So he hired me to run their sports. We had a mutual friend. I met Michael, very good salesman, convinced me to move from New York to California. And so I was there for 2.5 years. And the company had a lot of ups and downs. I just think that there was I really like Michael, but there was a lot of people in Hollywood that probably didn't want to see him do well again in the entertainment space. Anyway, so I was there. And one of the things I told Michael was, I really want to start a basketball division. And that's how I initially got into it. So there. But it was a startup. And so when AMG was going through what it was going through very quickly, as I said, I was there about 2.5 years. I left and said, okay, I really want to start my own company, which I actually did 2.5 years before that. But I said, all right, I'll take a chance and I'll try this. But I probably should have just gone out and done that. So that's when I started Excel 2.5 years later.
So Jeff, you're in an industry that doesn't have an exorbitant number of entrepreneurs. Most of sports are people who work in established brands that have been around for a very long time. What made you take the risk and say, I can start and build something? And what were some of the early just surprises you had of running your own business versus being part of a business?
I don't think there was any specific reason other than I had an inner belief that I could do it. IMG was a great place to learn and train. And I was there, I think, during the heyday. Mark McCormick was still running it. It's where I met Casey and Mark. And it was just a awesome place to learn how to be in the sports management business. But I thought, I kind of want to do this a little bit of a different way. I want to have, and we still talk about it today. If you ask Casey or Mark, the whole idea of great client service, like take care of your clients in a way that they know you've got, when they put their head on their pillow at night, they're confident and comfortable that they know you've got their back. I just thought I can do this in a different way. And when I was deciding what other sport I wanted to do, I landed on the NBA because I liked the NBA, but I also saw there was an opportunity, 2 places I saw. One, an opportunity that they weren't doing a very good job marketing their athletes, unless you were Michael Jordan at that time or Magic. So the marketing part was a big deal to me because I was like, all right, I'm going to do tennis. I was going to continue to do tennis for a bit, but I wanted a second sport to get involved in. I love hockey. Like, I love playing hockey. I love hockey. New York Rangers. Ask me what really, if I could have done anything, playing center or left wing for the New York Rangers, that would have been it. But I just didn't see the endorsements there. I also saw, this was a time when I thought the NBA, again, this took a little foresight, but I believed it was going to grow. Globally, I saw the game growing. And I'm like, well, I really understand how to recruit kids from all over the world. I wasn't married, I didn't have kids. I'm like, oh, what's the worst that happens? I fall on my face and I have to go work for somebody. So I think it was just a belief in myself and not worrying about if I fail. Like, that was it. I don't think it was anything more than that. I'm like, okay, if I don't get a paycheck for a while, I'll figure this out. But really lucky, the players I got to start with, those NBA players, and I still was working with some tennis players. So I was involved in tennis a little bit. And for 4 years, I did the NBA and tennis together when I first started. And I just saw this huge opportunity in the NBA. And I said, so when everybody retires that I'm working with in tennis, I'm not going to sign new tennis players and I'm just going to focus on the NBA. Even when I was doing it in the NBA, I thought, okay, how do I grow this? How do I grow this in other areas? And the one thing that was most important to me was who I was doing it with, like the people. Like I could have hired people and said, okay, we're going to get into football, or we're going to get into baseball, or we're going to get into hockey. But I really wanted to do it with people I trusted. And I thought, if we're going to be best in class in everything that we do, because that's how I came from. When I think about IMG, everything we did was best in class. So even though we were this really small agency, when I would meet with a family, I never acted like that. I acted like we were really big. In my head, we were big, even though when I go back to the office, there was only 3 people I would look at. I think that was the thing. Like, I know how to market your son, because at that point it was just the NBA, in a way that these other team sport agents don't. I've got relationships all over the world from my time in the tennis world. And so I think that helped us get off the ground. Yeah, it was just a belief that we could do that, wow, that I could do it.
And how many years into building it on your own with a handful of 3, 4, 5 people did you give Casey and Mark a call?
Well, Casey and I always stayed in touch. Actually, Casey, Mark, and I always stayed in touch. I probably didn't talk to Mark quite as much in the beginning as Casey. Casey and I, even though when he went to CAA initially, he and I always stayed in touch. I think it made CAA uncomfortable that we had such a close relationship always. So Mark and I would text once in a while. We ran into each other at a Gatorade commercial. He was representing Vince Carter, and I was there with Jason Kidd. It was great. We reconnected there. But, there was a lot going on in his world. He was taking a much bigger role at IMG, and so probably just didn't talk as much with Casey. But there was always some contact among the 3 of us. And then in 2000, probably 9, maybe. So I started 2002. So it'd been maybe 7 years and maybe we had gone to the right big size of 6 people at Excel, maybe 6 or 7. I think we hired a few more marketing people. I brought in another agent and, trying to do, and I was looking, I'm like, I know I can grow this. I know I can do this. I just got to figure out what direction that's going to be. And so then by 2010, started having some conversations with Mark. Was like, he was trying to figure out what he was going to do, whether he was going to stay, sign another contract there, whether he was going, he had offers from the other, the real big agencies, not the big agency in my head, but the real big agencies. I think it was the end of 2010 or the beginning of 2011 where everything kind of came together really fast. Casey was leaving CAA and Mark was making his decision. And so Casey came in first, and then a couple months, 3 months later or something, Mark came in. And I always think about it like I was just sort of a patient tiger in the grass waiting for both of them, just quietly waiting for both of them, and then pouncing when I had my opportunity.
You knew you wanted them.
Yeah, well, listen, they both were friends that I really trusted. I mean, Mark and I started 3 weeks apart at IMG. I remember the first time running into him at IMG, and we hit it off immediately. I moved from Westport, Connecticut, where I lived in a dump with like 4 other guys, but we were on the beach in Westport, Connecticut. It was great. I moved to Cleveland. I was like, oh my gosh, like where am I? And so Mark and I hung out all the time for the first couple of years. And we always joke, Casey was more mature than us. He would go home at night, but Mark and I would hang out to the wee hours, and one of us would fall asleep on the other one's couch. And so they were just friends. There was a long road of trust there from you're 25, 26 years old when you start with some people.
They best at what they did.
Yes, I knew that there was an opportunity to really build at a very high level, both baseball and golf. I also knew that, and we all talked about this, that thinking about growing the business in other areas, not being just a talent agency. So now we were going to be a multi-sport talent agency, but I really, and I had done a little of it. I had gotten into consulting even when we were small Excel. Somehow I got connected with a couple like Michael Eisner, and I was doing some work there. And when he had a bunch of companies he had invested in, and somehow someone connected us, and we were doing some consulting. But I'm like, okay, golf is going to be our Trojan horse really into the consulting world. So that was the thinking there to get us, how are we going to become a bigger player on the brand side? And even after we started the consulting business, it took years for people to think of us. We used to call it corporate consulting, but now we call it brand marketing, to think of us as a real brand marketing company, because we were still thought of as a talent agency. Bringing Casey and Mark in allowed me to try to start thinking bigger about it. I always had those thoughts, but actually executing on it is when, probably in 2011, when they came in.
Quick interruption. If you are enjoying the Excellent Leadership Podcast, I have a small favor to ask you. Could you please take a moment to like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review? It helps us grow the Excellent Leadership Podcast community and ensures we keep bringing you top-tier guests, powerful insights, and impactful episodes. Thanks for your support. Now, back to the show. You talked earlier about tennis. Do you think individual sports or team sports make better entrepreneurs?
I think the one thing that you have to deal with as an athlete in an individual sport is you've got to think about everything. There's nobody to your left and no one to your right to take care of something for you. So I think you get to be a little bit quicker on your feet and maybe think more creatively how to problem solve. So I'll just go with, since I was a tennis player, I'll just go with tennis, an individual sport.
But there's a common theme that I always see, though, is that athletes in general tend to make good employees. They're good at getting feedback, responding to criticism, pivoting and modifying what they do. We certainly have a lot of them around the Excel hallways.
And they're used to working hard. They're used to really working hard, rolling up their sleeves, and understanding what it is to be part of a team. That would be the other side of it. Understanding tennis players don't always understand what it is to be part of a team, because it's all about them. A team sport athlete understands the sacrifice that you have to make being part of a team. You know, doing your role, being accountable for your role, doing it well, and make so the person next to you can do their role and do it well. So a little different from the question you asked, but I think that team sport athletes probably make better teammates and for a company.
Part of your job, part of any executive's job, is to build deep relationships if they want to continue to have stay power in their career. What are some tricks you found along the way, or behaviors along the way, that you found work in developing strong, deep relationships?
I mean, it's going to sound really simple, but always being honest with people, for good or for bad. Like when you meet someone, you start to build a relationship, telling them the truth about whether it's something you're hearing about their business or something that you want them to know about your business, where they're a little surprised maybe that you told them that, but really trying to get a layer down in the relationship and be really honest with them. If you tell someone you're going to do something, make sure you do it. Always have that. I think that's how, when I'm building a relationship with someone, I want to make sure if I tell them I'll do something for them and then you don't do it, they're going to be always like everybody else. But if you always follow up and you follow through and you're honest about it, hey, I could do this, but here's the reason I couldn't do the other part of it, I think people appreciate that. I think it's also about staying in touch with people. It's hard when there's so many phone calls to make, but I think it's really important to always stay in touch, whether it's through a text, talking to someone, or a phone call. And I think people don't always do a good job with that. It's very easy to say, I'll call him tomorrow.
Yeah. Simon Sinek has a topic that he recently wrote about where he discusses consistency versus intensity, and how sometimes we have a behavior of just intensity, right? We go all in, the hardest work out of our lives. And he argues it doesn't matter how hard you've worked out if you do it one time. It's not going to have the results that you actually wanted.
Absolutely.
Or similar in relationships. You can have the absolute greatest date with your wife, but it was actually the consistency of regularly talking, regularly saying, I love you, that mattered. And you were just talking about that there, just following through committing to what you said, staying in touch with someone.
If you want to have, after all these years, just take the NBA, for example. I have relationships with certain either owners or team presidents or general managers that are real relationships. So I know that I'm going to obtain information from them that other people aren't going to get because they're going to trust me. But it's taken years to be consistent with them and for them to know that they can actually trust me with information and I can trust them with information. And I think for anything in life, whether it's making friends with someone or building a relationship with a CMO of a corporation, it doesn't happen overnight. But if you're true to who you are and you are consistent with them and you have good follow through and they know they can trust when they talk to you, that's how you're going to build a relationship with them, and that's how you're going to keep it.
A lot of people think they want to be a sports agent. What do they not know about the job of being a sports agent?
Yeah, there's a lot. Whenever I'll speak at a school, I always tell the kids this. I said, if you want a job where you are working 8 to 5, 9 to 6, you want to be home at night, you don't want to work on weekends, and you don't want to work during holidays, don't go into sports. Because when everybody else is home on their couch watching, that's when sports is happening. When I'm talking to the young people at Excel, I say, you have to live this. This is a lifestyle. You have to live this job. It's not just you turn your phone off at night. I mean, athletes don't know weekdays and weekends. It's all the same. And so you have to be ready to commit yourself to that. Some people say that, people say they are, but not everybody is. It's very time consuming, and you have to put your ego aside because it is never about you. It's about doing the best job for your athletes. Whatever the good things that happen in the athlete's life that you were a part of, it's not about you. It's about them. I think staying in the background and always remembering that is a really important way to be a successful agent.
You've worked with some of the best athletes of all time. What have you learned in their personal discipline on how they became who they were that you picked up? Did you pick up anything that you've applied to your own life on how they eat, how they work out, how they continuously learn and develop and adapt?
Listen, there's one foundational, I don't know, it's principle or whatever you want to call it that they live by. Like what they do, if you're at the top, if you're a star in whatever sport you're in, your job and your sport, the thing is the thing. Like all the other stuff has to go around that. And I sometimes think athletes, some of them forget that, and the other parts of the success of the celebrity interfere with that. But the one thing I've always seen with great athletes in any sport is they never let something get in the way of what they have to do to be great at their craft. Whether it was Pete Sampras in the tennis world and what he did with his workouts and how he was number one in the world for 7 years, but he never, ever stopped working as hard as he worked from when he first became number one in the world. Or Paul Pierce calling me, he would call me at 6 a.m, just to screw with me. He'd call me at 6 a.m. and see what I was doing. And he'd say, you can't keep up with me. I just finished in the gym. Like he and someone he usually worked out with, I mean, they would go at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning and get a workout in. I want to be sleeping at that time. But, so that hard work, Jason Kidd would say to me, after he's like an 8-time All-Star, I have to show my value every night. Like that mentality of that's what great athletes do. And in any sport, no matter who they are, they never forget about that hard work, and they're humble about it. If you watch Roger Federer, right? To the very end, he was always humble about his sport, but he always put that work in there. He never let it become about something else. And I always appreciate that. So to me, I've always taken out of it, it's the work that you do, like all the other perks and whatever comes out of having being successful at whatever you're doing, but never forget that part.
Well, you've built now a several hundred person agency. So as you've scaled through the years, how have you been able to, what key traits do you look for in your hires? Because it's easier maybe to measure statistics on a court when they were a former athlete, but how do you know they're going to be great for you? What key things do you look for?
Look, I think in growing this, one of the, and you can't do it by yourself, obviously. We have a great team of a great operating team to operate the business. But for me, the ability now to take a step back and be able to think bigger picture with it, and how we want to go into all the different areas we go into. The first thing is finding the right people to go into those areas. I'll use an example of something of a recent acquisition when we acquired Rep One, the football. I think we dated them for 15 to 18 months, like really to get to know them, and that was really me and Ryan Tolner. Ryan, the lead person there. Lots of conversations, few lunches, but really thinking, is this a person that I think can lead a business, grow a business? Are they going to, and this is overall, will they fit the Excel culture? Now you guys are going to say, what's the Excel culture? Will they fit the Excel culture? Will they just fit in with us? I think I look at those traits for anyone that we're hiring. Now, I'm not involved in our day-to-day and everybody we hire, but at a higher level, I'm going to meet the person and I'm going to ask them a bunch of questions, and I'm going to think about, is this someone you want to have in the fight with you every day? And do they fit us? Will they be, like, same thing you asked on really a lot of those sports questions. Are they going to be a good teammate? Are they a good problem solver? Do they have good follow through?
Do they grind?
Yeah, just do they grind? Do they know how to tell the truth? And the truth sometimes hurts, but tell the truth. Those things I look at a lot in hiring anybody. And sometimes the simplest things of do they have good common sense, making good decisions? And, there's a big difference between being a really good agent and being a leader. Like, and not everybody translates from one. You could be a great agent. Doesn't mean you're going to manage people well and be a good leader. So looking at all of these different factors depends on what we're hiring.
What excites you about the industry the next 5 years?
Well, it's been so interesting to watch where sports has gone. I mean, just the last 20 years of sports. And I don't like to say anything is recession proof because anything can happen. But the one thing in sports is it's continued to grow. As technology keeps changing, how it affects sports, and I think us being more efficient, really, and not so much on the agent side, but on all the other things that we do, whether it's the brand marketing piece, whether it's the properties piece, whether it's the search business, whether it's events, like using technology to create just a bigger footprint for us of what we can do. I think internationally, a lot more is going to happen. I think that they're always a little behind what's happening in the U.S. from a commercialization standpoint, especially with leagues and stadiums and arenas. And I think there'll be more for us to do that way. It's interesting to watch all of these new leagues come in. I don't think they'll probably all make it, but the ability now for the appetite for people that you've got, 3 or 4 new leagues starting, who's going to rise in that one and what role can we play in helping these leagues? I really want to continue to grow our football presence. I think there's a lot of opportunity on the football side for us. I feel like we've got the right people in place and now our opportunity to grow it. Somehow, some way, we're going to get more involved in soccer. Just don't know exactly what that means yet. We're doing obviously a lot on the brand marketing side. We'll probably do more on the property side. But the question is, do we get involved on the talent side in soccer? There's a lot to do.
Yeah, it's excitement.
If you had asked me 5 years ago, would Excel be in this place now? I would have I don't know what I would have told you. So I don't even know where we'll be 5 more years from now. But I know that we'll continue to grow, but grow the right way, bring in the right people. And I think for us, really thinking through, I don't want us just to throw darts. I want us to really be strategic. And I think that we've been really consistent in our story, our narrative of what we are, wanting to be the premier sports agency in the world. And we haven't gotten off track in that. And I think that's been really good for even our culture and everyone being able to talk about what we are and where we want to go.
Well, I think just even the almost 3 years we've been here, we've gone from 100-ish people to hundreds.
Right.
Just the growth has been tremendous, and to see such blue skies ahead is it's exciting for everybody.
Sometimes I think back and I laugh about when we were 4 people and to where we are now, but I love it. I mean, I think what's kept me really motivated is being able to think about the big picture here and what's next for us and what we can do and how do we do it really well. I mean, that's really exciting.
7 question blitz, and we have to blitz because you need the office back. 7 questions we ask everybody. What's sporting event have you never been to that you would love to attend?
The British Open.
You haven't done that.
I haven't gone to the British Open. I told Mark and I've told my wife, I really want to go to the British Open.
What 3 people, living or historic, would you love to go golfing with? You pointed to the picture on the wall of Elvis.
Yes, Elvis. Abraham Lincoln. I don't know if he golfed or not. Bob Dylan.
All right, what sporting memory holds the greatest place in your heart? You've been to a lot of historical moments.
A really cool moment when the Celtics won their championship with KG and Paul and Ray. They were all sitting back in a training table. And I don't know, Paul grabbed me to come back there with him. And it was just the 3 of them. And they had never won before. And obviously all were in their 30s and they'd played for a long time. And they all had individual accolades. And for them to for Paul to actually ask me to be there with the 3 of them and listening to how heartfelt and sincere and emotional they were. And for me to be a part of that was really, really a cool moment.
They didn't share that with anyone.
They didn't share with anyone.
Wow.
And I just happened to be like the fly on the wall that was literally there. I think we were all drinking beer and just, it was a really amazing moment.
What's something about you most people don't know?
My love of music, maybe. As you can see in my office.
Yeah, you have good speaker systems over here. All of that.
It's filled with music. Yeah, my love of music.
Do you have any professional pet peeves? Can't stand it when someone in the office does
I can't stand when people are rude. I cannot stand rudeness.
Yeah.
If you could not work in sports, what would you be doing today?
I can't be a hockey player anymore, right?
You can't be a hockey player anymore.
I'll be a tennis coach for my kids.
Last question. We're in Miami. What's your favorite dinner spot here?
I think my favorite spot is Zizi's.
Zizi's?
Yeah, Zizi's. Yeah.
Okay.
Jeff, easy enough. Thanks for joining the Excellent Leadership Podcast. We loved talking to you and getting to know you better.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jeff.